Hey everybody, this is Leslie Roder with a Marketer's Braintrust, and all frivolity aside, now 5 minutes late, we now finally have all systems go when we declared engage, and Michelle was just making some Star Trek noise, which unfortunately we missed on the recording.
Thank goodness.
Yes, for sure, right. We'll work on that for next time. And so Michelle chants sang thong. There's no R in that.
You did great. You did great. You get an A+ today.
Any part of that last name, there's no R. And then Dan Thies, there's no R in that either, which is strange. And then Corey Burke, and there is no R in Corey and Burke, and Corey. So anyway, those are the brains and the brain trust currently. God knows we should get some more because more brains is better. So today we have a show for you that was actually delayed because I couldn't speak without coughing wildly. At least that was, well, that's what I got.
That's why I updated a 10-year-old presentation just for you. Yeah,
that's true. And by the way, I learned a lot from that 10-year-old presentation. So, yeah, what does that say? But hopefully,
evergreen content, Dan. Evergreen content.
Business math is pretty much the same as business math was back when J.P. Morgan was getting away with all kinds of criminal stuff.
I think that
was like, what, 40, 50 years ago at least, Leslie?
I was there.
Perhaps even more than a century. The thing is, the stuff doesn't change that much, but if you don't know your business's math, it's hard to do things with your business.
There's that. So in the chat box that you will find on the page where you're watching this, yes, Terry, soon, and so you can ask your questions, and we'll get around to answering those as soon as we get on, with our prepared presentation, and. Yeah, so what we're going to do today, and let's see. Well, I guess why don't we? Is there anything newsy that we should cover before we launch into the presentation, Dan?
Actually, there's a whole bunch of newsy stuff going on in the world of Bing and in the world of Google, but I do not have anything organized about it because I am still trying to digest it all. But we should have a lot of interesting things to say next week.
Well, let's do that. So next week, we've already decided.
Let us comment intelligently rather than just read them the headlines, which if they had an interest in a particular area, they'd likely have already read.
Like, people we will not name on this broadcast who do that. Yes, okay.
Right.
All right, good. All right, well, let's see. If I can actually share my screen and show a presentation, we'll just launch into that right now then, shall we? All right, here we go. Let's see, this button right here.
2,
present to everyone. Yeah, if only it was that easy, right?
Did you mark yourself as presenter?
I did. I just did that.
Leslie, take 2.
That's button push number 1, and then button push number 2 is show entire screen and share. And then we get the indefinite mirrors. And somebody said that there's a way to get out of that, by the way, which is really interesting.
No indefinite mirrors today.
And then
I avoid it with 2 monitors, which I'm sure you have.
Well, not exactly.
Hold up, because Leslie, it was directing to Dan and Michelle for a second there when they were speaking. Did you change that?
Leslie has not made himself the sole presenter at this time. That's one of those rookie mistakes that, technically speaking, it's still his rookie season until next November. So,
but the moment I pressed,
it could be a bumpy ride for a long time. Oh, there we go again.
Frickin' button. I pressed the frickin' button. Here I am. And I said, present to everyone. There. Okay. So now somebody else talk.
Okay. How about this?
I pressed the frickin' button. It's right there. I pressed it. It said present to everyone. I pressed the frickin' button.
You know what they need? A button with Michael Bolton's hair that says sole presenter.
All right. Now we just have to all mute ourselves and do it.
But actually,
put the training wheels on. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. I think I actually got it because it was like yet another button to press. But anyway, all right. So present from beginning. Here we go.
Hey, it's working.
Yeah, wow. When you press the present to everyone button, what you get is a button that says present to everyone.
Oh, so
that sounds like a good idea.
Because you wouldn't want to be too
double redundant security.
All right. So
I just like that we didn't let Leslie go halfway through the presentation before telling him.
Well, that I'm good with that too.
Right. So the co-pilot here is getting better.
Jesus.
Your Logitech software would like to be updated. Thanks, Logitech.
All right, let's get serious. All right. So I hope, please, tell me please, that everyone watching this presentation has a business. The question is, do you have any math for that business? Because I mean, if you don't, there's a really question in my mind is whether or not you actually have a business. So in this session, what I'm going to show you here is a new way to look at the way you make money. I mean, that's what business is supposed to be about, right? And a new way to look at the ways to make money, not just the way you're currently doing it now, but all of the different ways you could make money. Because just because you're in a business now doesn't mean it's the only business you could be in. And there are ways to take the business you're in and change it, morph it, evolve it, or even just like throw it away and start over if you decide that it's just not really going to meet your goals. And then finally, there's a process of taking the business you have and finding ways to make it actually better. And so whichever path you want to go on, and whether you want to take, starting out from scratch, pick one from, from zero if you're not in one right now, or take the one you have and make it better, or change it in some particular way, right? That's what we're going to do. Now, by the way, this is really, it's 3 parts in a series, and we'll get to the other parts at some point, and it's not going to be next week or the week after maybe, but sometime, right? So this one is going to focus on the math of business. In any business, you may be operating a 7-Eleven, and a lot of this is going to apply to you. The other ones are really important as well, and a lot of people don't really think about them. Funnel math. It's like, how does your funnel work? Do you really understand where you can really turn the dials and the levers in order to make things work best for your online business? And so the second piece of this really is purely about online. The stuff we're talking about today is about any business in general, doesn't matter what it is. And then finally, don't enter something unless you know how to exit. It's kind of like when you walk into a movie theater, can you find the red exit signs? It's a good idea to look for them. I'm just saying. I mean, stuff happens. When you get into a business, it's easy to get into business. All you have to do is like register a name and say, hey, I'm in business, right? Used to be maybe not even used to be, it's like anyone unemployed is a consultant. True, right? All they're doing is looking for some way to make money. Is that a business? Sure. It's a little tiny business. Not a great one, and guess what? It has no exit plan. The exit plan for most business, most consultants, quote-unquote consultants who are just out of work, the exit plan is to get a job, right? Maybe that's good if you're unemployed. I get it. I mean, hey, you got to do what you got to do. But if you're going to start a real business, let's say you're $100, $200, $500, $800,000 a year, what are you going to do? Are you going to build that to bigger, or are you just going to stop? Do you think you can sell that? Whatever. What's your exit plan? And there's math about that too, and we'll cover that in a future session. But for right now, let's talk about business math. Starting at the foundations, the term trade or business, according to the IRS, generally includes, I love that, any activity carried on for the production of income from selling goods or performing services. And what they're really talking about there is that, you just have a hobby that you like to do, no, that doesn't really quite cut it, although you got to look carefully. Maybe some of you have businesses that might actually qualify as hobbies. Income to the IRS means taxable income or net profit. And obviously, from all of the above, the purpose of business is to make a profit. Well,
so the purpose of a business is to pay taxes then. Very good.
Well, pretty much. From the IRS perspective, yes. I mean, you should actually throw off enough income that you actually owe taxes, your quote-unquote fair share. But I was saying, everyone is like, well, of course, I'm supposed to make a profit. Duh, right? No news there. Thank you, Leslie, for stating the obvious. And yet, are you actually making a profit? Now, there are various ways to determine whether you are or not. If you were to replace yourself with somebody that you could get to do what you do, which, wow, for most of it, that would be hard. What salary would you pay them? Would you still be making a profit? Are you actually sure that you're even making a profit now, even with the non-salary you're making, and how much is that? And then the most important question is, how are you making a profit? That last question is the most important of all, because it gets to the structure of the business that you're running. That's the thing that most people really don't understand, because guess what happens? When you wander into the swamp with the directions to go drain it, pretty soon you're attacked by alligators and you forget what the hell you were doing there in the first place. And we all get wrapped up in the day-to-day operations of this thing we call our business, which ends up just being this lead weight around our neck, worse than a job in many respects. And so, wait a minute, what was I trying to achieve? I forget. How much profit are you actually making, or are you making any at all? By looking at the structure of the business and how to analyze from a numerical perspective, you can know, yes, I am, or no, I'm not, and if I'm not, or even if I am, how do I make things better? How do I fix what's wrong, and how do I make things better? And there's a basic structure to it. And that's the thing, is because by understanding the math, by understanding the structure of how different businesses work, different business models work, you can understand how to make more money from them. Now, the answer to that question comes in two parts, and what we call business model and business financial model. A business model is the way you make money, and I'll explain that in a minute, whereas the financial model is the actual value of what you do, essentially, for consumers. Now, I mean, if that doesn't make sense to you just yet, that's okay. Just bear in mind that business model is the way you make money, and the financial model is essentially how much you make because of the value you provide. Your business model is the way you add value. And so you're like, add value, what's that mean? Okay, well, if you look at it very closely, the computer you're sitting in front of while you watch this presentation, ultimately, deep down, is made of minerals. That screen is made of silver, which is, by the way, in short supply. Everyone wants to talk about peak oil, but we've been past peak silver for a while now, which is actually more serious for all of us iPad owners. All of the components inside are made from gold, which is reclaimable. That's good. Silver, which is not. Copper, it's a problem. There's a bunch of PVC in it. And, oh, wait, there's integrated circuits, and they're made of sand. Okay, well, if you want to take a pile of sand and put it on your desk and try to compute with it, good luck. Intel and a variety of other companies add value to that sand by creating integrated circuits and then up from there. So there's a value chain, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Actually, Leslie, the Chinese used to do computation with sand once upon a time.
Okay, fair enough. And beads on sticks, yes.
At least we can give the Chinese credit. I'm not sure the sand had much to do with it.
Probably not. Almost anything would do, yes. So there are many ways to deliver value other than making integrated circuits out of sand and gallium arsenide and things like that. 7-Eleven, for example, and Stop and Go and various things like that, delivers convenience. That's a value add. I mean, you could either take 17 minutes and walk from the parking lot into the Walmart. Actually, it's probably 7 minutes in the parking lot, 10 minutes in the Walmart to get that item. Or you could pay a higher price and walk into a 7-Eleven and be in and out in 2 minutes. Their prices are higher because they offer convenience. Costco optimizes cost per unit. I mean, I remember when I was lived in Portland, oh God, it's been like a dozen years ago. I needed paper clips, and so I bought paper clips at Costco. Do you realize that's the only time in my entire life I've bought paper clips? I'm still using the same batch of paper clips. Optimizes cost per unit, but you need to store that stuff. Rolls-Royce sells status. I mean, status has value. Why would you buy a Rolls-Royce? Because of the emblem on the hood. So there are lots of different ways to deliver value in the value chain. The different kinds, if you want to actually collect them, I mean, here it's kind of put them in boxes. You can invent something. All right, the person that invented Velcro. It's a really cool idea, and a great story, by the way. Intellectual property has value, and you license it. If you're really good at producing stuff, okay, contract production companies, logistics. How about FedEx? FedEx basically revolutionized delivery of components. I mean, of packages rather. One of my standard shticks is it's not servers and HTML that drives the web. It's overnight delivery. I mean, if FedEx did not change the paradigm. I mean, when UPS was there, they were like, UPS wasn't competing with the post office. How hard to get that beat, right? And so FedEx came on the scene, and now UPS and FedEx are head-to-head, And all of those out there that ship physical products, you know that you try to figure out whether it's FedEx, UPS, or USPS, that you're going to ship based upon how long it is and da-da-da-da, right? You can optimize the logistics. Well, FedEx provides logistics services. That has value. Promotion services. You're talking about like TV, radio advertising, stuff like that. You're talking about marketing companies, all those things. They provide value. Sales, support, all of these things are different kinds of value. How is it they create value? They create value because they make business bigger. They create more commerce. The reality is that there would be less commerce throughout the world, particularly the United States, without FedEx. If FedEx did not exist, if they had never figured out, oh my God, look what we can do, there would be less total commerce. In fact, most of us would not have businesses, by the way. Your unique value proposition is essentially your UPS. You know, when FedEx started, you know, it was like overnight delivery. It was like, are you kidding me? That's impossible. And you look at the way they do it, you still think there must be faster than light travel involved, right? And so your value proposition is your USP, and it doesn't have to be as overwhelming as FedEx, where basically what they were saying is the only thing faster is fax. It can be something simpler than that. It can be a particular segment of your market or whatever, but that is your big value proposition. No one business does it all right? FedEx is only good at one thing. Amazon's good at a bunch of things, but it's not good at everything. So we all must focus on a small number of values and outsource the rest, and that creates value chains. Now, in bigger companies, talk about supply chain management and stuff like that, and we'll see some examples of that in just a minute as we talk about some real examples of businesses. But ultimately, you need to look at what's your value chain, and when you look at your business model, your particular business model, your value chain, your value in the chain will become apparent. So let's. But before we cover that, we have to look at the numbers. Before we can actually look at how value chains are created, we need to look at what the financial models are. So there's, in addition to your business model, which is how you make money, there's your financial model, which is essentially what your value is actually worth. So let's talk about the different pieces of that financial model. First, there's revenue. Everyone knows that is. Like, oh, that's how much was deposited in my bank this month. That's great. And it's a very important number, don't get me wrong. And it's something like, usually, it's something like unit sales times the average selling price. So that'd be, I sell widgets, they're $100 a piece. I sell 100 this month, there's $10,000. Now, it might be months of a continuity. So I had 100 customers this month. That's $5, per month, and that's $500. And I fully expect them to, stay around for some period of time, and so that's my forecast, that's my projection. But whichever one it is, you provided some either service or product, a unit of sales for a particular price, and that's the total dollars you brought in. From that, you have to subtract various expenses, and they come in two categories. There's variables and fixed expenses. So for a lot of you, this is going to be repeat, but stay with me for a little bit, because I think probably can still show you some things you maybe not have figured out. So there's the cost of goods sold. Now, for those of you doing something like a membership site, that's essentially zero. We'll talk about that a little bit later. For a lot of folks on this call, though, it's you're doing physical e-commerce, and so that when you sold $100 worth of stuff, you actually had to buy that stuff in order to send it to the customer. That's your cost of goods sold. If you're selling widgets and that widget cost you $50 and you sold it for $100, there you go. Your cost of goods sold is $50. Actually, you need to deliver, include delivery to the customer. There's FedEx and UPS again, right? So maybe it's actually more like 55 instead of 50. I'll wait till the numbers in that in a minute. There's also cost of sales. A lot of us, when we're first starting out, we don't realize just the value of selling, if you will, in a sense. It's like, who's doing that selling? Is it just a web page out on the web? Okay, could be. Hang on. Are we running AdWords ads? Well, there's a cost of sales. You see, the AdWords ads that drive traffic to your website that ultimately convert into sales, That's not a cost of delivery. It's not a cost of goods, but it is a cost of sales. So let's say that you sold, $100, but you spent $20 on AdWords to do it. Your cost of sales is $20 for that $100 of sales. For those of you doing outbound selling, or account managers, stuff like that, salaries, commissions, promotional discounts. The actual cost of the product is $100, but in order to make the deal, you sell it for $80. That $20, that's a cost of sales. All of these things are buried. And by the way, these are line items in your tax return. If you don't know this, well, you should. Then there's this other problem of fixed expenses. And so, first of all, as an owner, you're a fixed expense. You're probably also a variable expense if you're doing selling. But general administrative are things like your accountant, your facilities manager, or your, maybe your factory floor manager or whatever. Things which are not variable, not directly variable with your total revenue. And these things you end up ultimately distributing across your unit sales, and that's maybe that's a little bit too much accounting for now. But maybe you have an office, maybe you have a warehouse, maybe you have servers and shopping carts that you have monthly fees on, stuff like that. All of those things, and so those are all fixed expenses that you have to have. In business, you've got them, right? We pay somewhere between, depending on how much mailing we're doing, on the low end $1,000, and the high end almost close to a couple $1,000 for Infusionsoft every month. I wouldn't run a business without it, by the way. A little bit of a plug there. But that's not a variable expense. That's a fixed expense. It's not fixed in cost. It's fixed because it's not related directly to total unit sales. And so that's one of those things you have to spread that cost, over it. And by the way, there's some magic you can do where you have low variable costs and high fixed expenses. It's actually one of the best go public strategies ever invented, but we probably don't have time to cover that today. So let's cover some common terms. We talk about gross margin. Now, these vary dramatically based on what country you're in as to how people talk about these, by the way. And so these are more or less the U.S. terms, and I think we invented capitalism, so that's okay. So gross margin is essentially revenue minus cost of goods sold. So what does that mean? That means I sold a widget for $100, and that widget from my vendor or from my factory costs $50. There we go, bingo. Gross margin is $50 or 50%. Contribution margin takes into account the cost of selling it. All right, so I sold that $100 widget that cost me $50 to make, but it cost me $10 in AdWords, say, for example, to actually sell that, or it cost me $10 in some outbound in-house or out-house sales guy to sell it, whatever. See, that's a different number. Contribution margin is actually the better number to look at because it incorporates your cost of selling, and selling has a cost. Now, ultimately, there's this thing we call earnings before tax, and I invite you to look at the full definition, which is called EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and allowances. You can find that on Wikipedia. We don't need to go into that. Most of us don't have, a lot of that other stuff, right? Some yes, some not. But mostly, what we want to know is this thing that we call colloquially profit, which is it's earnings before tax, and at least in the VC community. And that's going to be after you take contribution margin for all of your product sales. All right, so you take the total amount of sales, you subtract all the cost of goods sold, subtract all the cost of sales, and you subtract all of your G&A and facilities. The critical thing here is you could actually be underwater, you could be losing money because your G&A and facilities are too large relative to the rest of those numbers. And we'll talk about economies of scale here in a little bit. But you could actually look really good on contribution margin and totally suck on earnings. So just bear that in mind. You need to be looking at both of those because that's some of the hint about what you can improve in your business. But we're just going to call contribution margin, for the sake of this presentation, we're going to call margin, and earnings before tax we can call profit. All right. So here's an example of what I would consider healthy numbers. Right? So let's say we brought in revenue of 100 whatever, 100 shekels, $100 million, whatever. And let's say that our cost of goods sold was 40 of that. Now that's a little bit on the high side, maybe, because what I want to do is I want to get at least a 3x markup from whatever my cost to produce is, realizing I have to ship it to my customer, and so that's going to increase it a little bit. And so these numbers are going to vary based upon the business. This is only an example that we're going to use to analyze different business models here in just a couple minutes. So let's say my cost of goods sold ends up 40, and that includes shipping costs. My cost of sales is 20. That's at the very maximum high end of what I would allow in a business. You want to aim for somewhere between 15 and 20. If you're below that, it means you're not trying hard enough. You're above that, it means you suck. And now, general and administrative is the stuff that's, it's overhead personnel that are not directly related to unit sales. Facilities the same way. These numbers will vary dramatically based upon the size of your business. Again, economies of scale. And so these numbers are probably representative of say, $1 million business. If you can get a 20% net profit margin before tax out of $1 million business, you're doing really nicely. Now, what does that look like? That looks like your salary, probably, is what that is. Okay, just so that you know where that 20 is going. Now, your business model drives your financial model. So all these nice little looking numbers here are based upon some wild ass assumptions about what your business model looks like, and I'm going to show you here in a minute how you map from your business model to these so-called, healthy numbers. Let's start with the worst business model of them all. There, kind of presaged the conclusion there. Affiliate marketing. Affiliate marketing is the easiest business to start. You can literally be up in a weekend. Great, but what's wrong with that picture? Anything that easy, anyone will do, which means you will have pretty much everyone on the planet above the age of about 14 competing with you. So let's start with the fact that you're paid on commission. So what is your total revenue for your business? Is the commission paid to you by whoever's stuff you're selling, right? So your margin is whatever your commission is minus your cost of sales. Okay, that's good. Now your cost of goods sold and your facilities are zero, so that's cool, right? And your general administrative is probably really low. In fact, it might be 0 too if it's just you and your bathrobe and a kitchen table. But the only levers you can move in order to make this a better business are cost of sales and commission. So let's think about that. Your commission is a plea deal with your vendor. I mean, they're going to, there's a standard deal, which is we'll give you whatever, and then if you can do enough volume or convince them that you're worthy in some other respect, maybe you can make it better. But because your G&A is so low and your facilities and costs, because you could actually, if you kind of go look at the the numbers on this previous slide here, we'll go back to that just so you can look at that. You'll notice you got some numbers that look totally zero, as opposed to this like example healthy numbers. So it could very well be that you could go much higher on your cost of sales. You could afford to spend more in order to make the sale because you have such low overhead. And that's what appeals to people who go into affiliate marketing is the low overhead. It's a great, lifestyle business. You can lay on the beach with your laptop and free Wi-Fi from the, Wi-Fi from the resort behind you and make money. True, but it's kind of a savant's business model because the best you can do is be better at optimizing your cost of sale than anybody else laying on the beach next to you. Okay, good. Maybe that works for you. I don't know. Could be. I don't know. And the thing about it is, if you look at this carefully in terms of value chain analysis, your revenue is some portion of your vendor's cost of sales. Bear in mind, your vendor has a spreadsheet just like you. And so what's your vendor spreadsheet look like? Well, they have a cost of sales line item. What are they willing to pay you? You are the cost of sales. And they're going to cap that out at 20. No more than 20, no way. and they've got an affiliate manager and some other overheads. And so are you going to expect really on average to get more than 15%? Pretty much not, depending upon the market you're in. You could be as low as 5%. If you're talking about, cameras, it could be 2 to 5%. So affiliate marketing, here's an example of what that might look like. Let's say you sell $1 million of stuff at a 15% commission. You get $150,000. Now let's say, and I know Dan is probably going to roll his eyes here. Let's say you could somehow get, sell $1 million of stuff with a $50,000 cost of sales. Now what I did here, right? If you're only making $150K, by basic business math, you should not be spending more than about 30% of that on cost of sales, and that's at the high end given your low overheads, right? But think about that. You somehow took $50K and sold $1 million worth of business. That's a little bit of a reach, but just go with me for a moment. Bear in mind that the vendor that you're selling that $1 million for could actually afford up to $200K to get those sales because their numbers are different. You see, your cost of sales is a percentage of their cost of sales. So you start off with this massive disadvantage. They could spend all the way up to something like 20% of that $1 million to get those sales, and they still have a healthy business. You can't do that. You didn't even get that much in revenue, right? And so what you're depending on as an affiliate marketer is basically to be about, rounding off, 4 times smarter than your vendor.
You have to find a very inefficient market.
Yeah, and a really dumb vendor. Yeah.
If you find a very inefficient market, you can print money.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can't, and affiliate is an easy way to ramp up and quickly print the money that's available before the market becomes efficient. Then you can jump out and you don't own a warehouse full of whatever the hell you were selling.
Exactly, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The advantages of the affiliate model. But just bear in mind that your vendor can always beat you. Always, right? Now, it's not a bad model. Before we leave that, it's not a bad model to start out or test the market. You're gonna, you can get your feet wet and figure out whether it's really a market there, test your message, etc. And we'll talk about that at the end of the presentation, about how to go from nothing, to a capital event in 4 steps. And affiliate marketing could be actually the very first step in that. But let's move up a little bit and go to drop shipping. And I know a lot of folks that are probably watching this are doing drop shipping. Now, your cost of goods sold is your vendor's revenue less than allowance for cost of sales. So let's look at that. What's the relationship between you and your vendor, right? So your vendor is manufacturing it or importing it or something and shipping it for you. So you're paying them and they're making a profit, right? However, they don't have nearly the marketing machinery that you do. It's kind of a wholesale or retail sort of relationship, right? And so whatever the cost you're paying your vendor, if you look at it from their perspective, that's their revenue. And so now, how much are they charging you? Well, they're certainly charging you their cost of goods sold, but they're they have the manufacturer to import it. And they're charging you some amount of cost of sales because they at least have somebody to do, vendor relationships, right? So there's somebody on the, you can get somebody on the phone and talk to them, and that's not free, right? So there's your vendor's revenue less than allowance for cost of sales. So it's somewhere on the order of twice the cost of manufacturers. I figure what you can probably do. You're not obviously. There's no company out there that's going to just pass it through and not make a profit. That's obviously stupid. They can't do that. In fact, they get audited and shut down, as it turns out, because they're not making a profit. And so the reality is, what is the minimum you could expect to pay for something if you're not manufacturing it? And if you just kind of go back and look at that spreadsheet a few slides back, what you're going to find is there's only so much you can cut. There's going to be some G&A, there's going to be some facilities, there's going to be some cost of sales, even if they're not doing any retail at all. And so if you look at it, it's probably, close to somewhere around 2x of the actual cost to manufacture. So your revenue should be 2 to 3 times your cost of sales, which means it's really hard to be a price leader. When you look at it, if your vendor is doing any retail sales at all, you are already at a disadvantage. Why? Because their markup is in your cost of goods. Yeah. And so let's be fair here. If they want to earn a 20% on the revenue as actual net profit, that means there's already a 20% markup that's not yours. And so if you want a 20% markup, where does that put you? It puts you higher than them. Bottom line, there's no way around this. It's really, really simple math. On the other hand, if you find somebody who is not doing retail sales or doing such a crappy job of it, but that's not really a part of their equation, then okay, great, you can make this a win. It's a little bit fragile. Now, bear in mind, as a dropshipper, your G&A and your facilities costs are still very, very low. You can still do this in your bathrobe at the kitchen table. You occasionally have to handle returns and things like that, but it's still not a bad business, and it's an improvement numerically over affiliate marketing, isn't it?
And
go
ahead. Can I toss something out there to you?
Mm-hmm.
I think too, and with the math, it all works. One of the other parts, so, is in finding that drop shipping vendor. It's finding someone who doesn't have a full-time sales guy looking for other drop shippers.
Yep.
And so we went in a market where we had 20 competitors, and they had a salesperson who recruited 1,000 other websites to sell their stuff. It doesn't hurt them to have 1,000 people selling it.
Just hurts the 1,000 people.
It just hurts the 1,000, exactly.
Yep. Exactly.
That's just a little downside of this. Everybody has a downside, right?
Absolutely right.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got. I'm sure there are folks right now watching this that have incredible horror stories about vendors that gave them an exclusive on something, and then like 2 days later, it turned out that was just a lie to get some extra cash. You're on a little bit better terms and you have a little bit more control than an affiliate does, but on the other hand, you also have a lot more costs, and so you got a lot more skin in the game, and so you do need to be careful about the vendors. As an affiliate, if I don't like the widget company I'm selling for, I know where to get the traffic. I can switch to B or C or D, right? Just like that, as long as I'm in good on good terms with Commission Junction and stuff like that. Not so in drop shipping. You can have a line of products that you only have one vendor on, and it's not something where you just call up and say, hey, will you be my vendor today? There's credit checks and all kind of stuff that goes on, so you become less nimble for sure.
Absolutely. The only reason to do it is where you've discovered, and we'll get to this and kind of the progression between business models, but
on knowledge and belief, I think I'd be better off drop shipping than being an affiliate.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing.
But you would have probably been pretty happy as an affiliate to start with.
And that's the thing, is that once you've discovered that you have got really some secret sauce in terms of your messaging or in terms of market opportunity, the first way to actually get more money out of that market is to move from an affiliate model to a drop shipping model.
Well, if you can break even as an affiliate, that means you can succeed as a drop shipper. Right?
Well, I mean,
your profit is right there in that difference in cost.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, that's what this chart's intended to show. And I guess I should have, shown them side by side. But let's rework the example of selling $1 million worth of stuff. Now you have a cost of goods sold. Let's call it half of that, and you still have that 20% cost of sales. $200K, and you have a little bit more facilities and general overhead stuff. But now you're making 2.5. 250,000 instead of what you're making before, which was barely 6. And so it's 6 figures. And so drop shipping is the next step up from affiliate marketing. And at this point, you're in a real business. I mean, let's face it. What is the primary business model for Amazon? It's drop shipping. I mean, fundamentally, yes, they warehouse a whole bunch of stuff, but when you look at the amount that they warehouse versus what they drop ship, all you have to look and see is how many items have the Prime tag next to them, and you start realizing that there's a whole bunch of drop shipping going on at Amazon. So not a bad business model, and it also highlights the fact that if you get big enough, you can actually operate multiple business models at the same time. I guess I should say that now rather than waiting to the end, but Amazon actually is in the entire range of business models. When you look at it, they warehouse, they do some manufacturing, right? They've got their own iPads, here we go, right? They've got their own tablets. They're doing manufacturing. They're doing their own importing and warehousing. They're doing drop shipping, and they're doing software as a service, and they're doing information marketing, right? Info product marketing with streaming videos, right? They basically have the entire range of available business models, all of them at once. So you don't have to actually necessarily select, but when you start out, prioritize and serialize. So anyway, that's a kind of a digression. But so drop shipping, it can be made to work a lot better than affiliate once you've proven what your message to market is. We'll talk about more about that later. But the next step up from drop shipping, let's hey, wait a minute, we just pointed out that you're paying the drop shipper, the vendor of the products you're drop shipping, you're paying his margin and all those other things. Wow, wouldn't it be good if you could have that money for yourself? Well, of course, absolutely. So you can import your own stuff from China, containers floating on the water. You can manufacture it in the United States. You can do some combination of that. We have private clients that are doing combinations of that. We're literally, I can't remember what product category this is. I don't remember which client it is. We're literally, he imports the item from China, and he pulls it apart and replaces pieces of it with U.S.-made components in order to make it better and more reliable. It's like, I don't know, do you call that importing or manufacturing? It's a little bit of a both at the same time, right? And so your cost of goods sold is going to be a complex composite of materials and labor. You're going to have lots of plant and equipment, and there's this whole inventory management, that's a concern, and that's what's make this a real business. And this is where a lot of folks that we talk to, and there's one in particular I'm talking to now about this transition, where it's like, whoa, God, I don't know, I don't want to own a factory. Well, okay, you don't have to want to, but if you want to be big, get over it. Because the reality is, the more levers you have to twist, or the dials to turn, or whatever, the more ways you have to grow your business bigger. And there's this terminology in larger business called vertically integrated. The more of the value chain you own, the more you get to keep at the bottom line. And that's I just kind of told you the ending slide. So here's an example. Let's say now you start doing importing or manufacturing your own. And so you're going to save, something on the order of 20% on the cost of goods sold. And so now, wait, 200K is the bottom line. What happened? We earned less money by delivering more value? What happened here? Why did we make less money? If we bring it in-house instead of drop shipping it, how can we make less money? And it's because, of the economy of scale. The reality is that we can make more money if we just sell more stuff. And here's the problem. It's the G&A and facilities. As soon as you start talking about manufacturing, now you're talking about these fixed overheads. And these fixed overheads it's a good and a bad thing. And I don't have a chart that really explains this, but let's just kind of walk through it with me. And so if I have something that has a zero cost of goods sold, right? I mean, I can I can make $1 bazillion, and that's the software as a service or info product marketing model, and we'll cover those in a later session. But even if I don't have that, what if I have this really high facilities or G&A expense? I can still make $1 bazillion as long as I sell 1 bazillion people. And so, an anecdote, personal experience. And so one of my little vacations, I took down to Fort Lauderdale, and one of the little tours was a tour through the kind of yacht alley. And so it was these really high-end homes with these yachts parked out, on the canal where the homes are stationed at. Okay, great. I mean, I aspired to that living. Of course, I wanted to check it out so I could look for property, right? And so, interesting that the guy that owns Dell had a smaller yacht than the guy unknown to me, who owns the largest garbage collection franchise in the United States. Okay. Seems like a pretty no-name, low-margin business. Has really high fixed overheads, too, by the way. However, everybody needs garbage collection. That's not one of the first things you're going to turn off, is it? And so the reality is you can make a business of almost anything. You just have to understand the numbers. And some of the numbers work better at high scale than low scale. And so for those of you who are struggling in your business because you're not making a profit, I want you to do this. Do this math at where you are right now. Keep the numbers more or less the same and double them and see what happens. Because almost all cases, what you'll find is that you will make money. If the business is worthy at all, you will make money at higher scale. Now, in this example, what I showed here is the facilities and G&A did not scale with revenue. That's
why you call it a fixed cost.
Yeah. I mean, it's only marginally. That's the thing. There's the variable and fixed is only approximate, right? And so it's not really fixed. I mean, you say, oh, well, I spent this much when I was $1 million, so when I'm at $10 million, it'll be the same. Not true, and that's why. And here I overstated it, frankly. Right? We doubled the business. We increased G&A and facilities by 50%. That's never going to be true. It's more likely to be 10 or 20%. So your profit's actually going to be more than that. It's going to be more like $600K than $500K.
Well, if it scales at 1-to-1 with revenue, then it's
a variable. It's a variable. Anything less than a 1-to-1 is obviously not variable, right? Yeah, it's absolutely right, Dan. Thank you. And so, and the thing about it is that you can build these businesses that have really high G&A and facilities. Like, for example, take Amazon Web Services, right? They have this cloud computing environment. Well, hang on. Let's say they had this massive cloud computing environment and only 7 customers. Well, that sucks, doesn't it? It's because they have this enormous fixed expense. There's no way they could do that. The only way
as Amazon, their first customer was big enough to build it. But the number of different facilities they have and the size of facilities and the amount of on-demand capacity that they have now takes a lot of people to pay for that, but they never know who it's going to be or how much they're going to buy.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and so the thing is that they legged into that deal by needing it internally. Now, so it's brilliant. I mean, Jeff Bezos is and his management team obviously have done a brilliant thing there.
Well, they're doing the same thing we used to do as internet service providers. When we ran dial-up ISPs, everybody wanted to sell web hosting because the other half of the bandwidth in your T1 was the bandwidth going back out.
Yep.
So you wanted to be able to use both parts of your connection fully. But in the same way, right? Amazon can manage and do a lot of their work in the off-peak time on their cloud and rent the peak time out at a higher rate.
True enough. Yeah.
Actually make money off of their G&A.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So they took something that was essentially a cost center for them because they needed that services. They needed all of those services, including, by the way, MTurk. I mean, they invented MTurk for their own uses. Whole nother story. And they use that and say, hey, we have this big cost center. Shit, I wonder if other people need this stuff. Hey, suddenly it's a business unit. And now that's a special case. Most of us are not going to run into exactly that, right? And that's okay. But just realize that there are some businesses that have, they have to get to a certain level to really turn the corner, as we say, right? Where do you actually cross over, into profit margin? And you could be, for those of you who have smaller businesses, you could have the most wonderful business in the world if you just doubled it. That's all you'd have to do, and you'd be like slap happy. And that's because of your fixed versus variable. So let's move on to the next business model. That's actually kind of a continuation of this. If you were a drop shipper now, you probably can't actually buy your vendor. Depends on your situation. If it's we have private clients who have done this and are doing this. Okay, I'll give you a couple of examples. But why would you, as a drop shipper, decide to suddenly own the factory? Well, because you gain 35 to 45% pretty much immediately. Now, think about that. How else? What else do you have in your plan for 2015 and 2016 even, right? Take longer than a year. Hell, I don't care. What else can you do that you can add 30 to 50% to your business?
Well, and keep in mind, you're also buying every competitor that was selling this vendor's stuff as a revenue stream. So when they spend money on AdWords to try and outbid you, that's okay. They're bleeding money so that they can pay you money.
Yeah, that's right.
That feels a lot better when you look at the AdWords auction, when you just laugh and say, wow, they're all paying me anyway.
Indeed, that's true. Yeah, you can continue to even let them sell your stuff. So you continue
to hone that funnel in of and then select the people you want to sell your stuff and deselect.
Yeah, give the ones that are doing the best job of owning the search results a better rate so they can sell more. It's always worked for me.
Yeah, and there are a couple things. And so our good pal Jerry West, at one point he was selling, I think it was Comcast. That was what he said he was doing, and he was doing extremely well in AdWords and selling his Comcast stuff. And so he flew down and met with a company, and he got a better deal. And then what he did is he went out to all of the people who were bidding against him in the AdWords auction, and he made them his sub-affiliates, and he ended up paying them the same or slightly higher, and increased the total that he was responsible for, and to start with. It's because he got a better deal in the from the vendor. So you can actually, and that was a total affiliate play, right? So you can find kind of almost mispricings.
Yeah, that was just a straight up let me make this market more efficient and get what's missing, the key to that, right, was Jerry went and extracted a greater percentage of sales for affiliates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the vendor simply did not know that was what was going on, and so, and that's why that relationship didn't last very long. But
there's that, yeah. But anyway, one of our private clients, has been selling a device, and he's been sourcing it from a company in California, and he finally, and it was a device of his own specifications that they were manufacturing as his direction, and about 6-8 months ago, I'd have to go look my notes on that. He went to China. Flew out to China and spec'd the whole thing out, found a factory, and is building his own device, and it's basically multiplied his it's cut his cost of goods sold to do this in the right way, given this presentation, by about 50%. And so you look kind of back that into the numbers. If you just take the standard numbers I did on a previous slide and figure out what that did to his business, it's a dramatic change for him. To get that kind of a savings by going direct as opposed to essentially what was kind of a very closely knit drop shipping arrangement. Working with another client to do essentially the same thing, although in that it's a little bit different in that he's doing almost a merger in order to gain control, a little bit more better cost control of the production of his item. Those are things. I mean, if you find an opportunity and you're actually building a viable business on drop shipping, the next step is to figure out, how do I get even better margins on the thing I'm selling?
So, Leslie, you mentioned one option being to buy your vendor, but that can be kind of an extreme step.
Yep.
There are also intermediate steps that you can get into, which can help you actually understand better their cost structure and things like that, certainly as a way to get to deepen the relationship. And we've dealt with people, in the wedding business, where obviously a lot of our friends in that business and are importing now, but a lot of them started along that road by approaching a vendor and saying, hey, look, we've got some designs that we'd like to have manufactured. Can you make this for us? We'll guarantee to buy this much. We want an exclusive for this many months. Or Dan will have to give a deposition about your betrayal later.
That was a special case.
Yeah, that was and they completely screwed themselves in the marketplace by trying to screw our friends. But right, you can, if you've got a vendor and they're getting stuff manufactured and they're importing, you can say, hey, look, we love what you've got. We're selling a bunch of it. Here's a few things that we want that you don't have, but right, we'll put the money up to be able to let you borrow money even if you have to manufacture it, because we'll guarantee you a certain amount of sales. We'll put up a bond for you, and that can be a great first step to take what are maybe the highest volume parts of your product line and improving the margin on those, right? The things that you've found maybe a very efficient way to sell through paid search or through Facebook advertising, or a combination of things, right, that maybe you're doing better than the rest of the market, because there's certainly room in marketing to get a lot more efficient than the market is at cost of selling. So when you see those opportunities, you can focus in on those areas, and that's I hope that in the next couple of weeks we'll get a chance to talk about how to do that math, because a lot of the times you can pick a product line and optimize the profitability of that, and that can be where you focus organic traffic, where you focus email traffic, where you focus affiliates, where you focus all your effort into the one part of your business first that's going to generate the most profit.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
We like profit.
Oh, yeah.
A lot. And it's creativity, right? I mean, it's hard to put numbers on that creativity, but we did the same thing, Dan. We sliced out a part of somebody else's entire product and went back to manufacturer and said, we like this part of this whole thing you sell. We buy just this part. And so how many do we need to buy? And they said, 1,000. Done. And
that's a box that fits in my garage.
Yeah, and it absolutely did. And overnight, sort of changed our business for that particular product line. But it was paying attention to what's happening in the market and being willing to be creative enough to find ways to make it work with what you're doing. Period.
Exactly. Right, and that's where you can actually be involved in multiple different business models at the same time on the same website. So you could be doing some drop shipping, some of your own warehousing and manufacturing or whatever, right? And you make those decisions based on a product line or product by product basis as to how you optimize your total take.
So Leslie, there's one other model that I wanted to mention that is kind of it's sort of the new cloud model. But with fulfillment by Amazon and things like that, we're starting to see retailers and distributors take advantage of the availability of stuff like that, and so you actually see somebody, rather than if you remember when when everybody in the wedding favor business was taking the trip to China and starting to import, right? What you're seeing now is where a dropship vendor won't do certain things, or they have certain issues with volume on certain products or things like that. What you're seeing is retailers take it, put it into fulfillment by Amazon, use Amazon to drive volume, and then bring other retailers on board so that they can increase the volume through that channel for those products, and thereby get significant discounts from the vendor, or even go beyond the vendor to a manufacturer. Because in a lot of cases, the drop shipper that's doing it for you is not the manufacturer of everything. and so gives you a chance to move upstream without having to. Again, it's Amazon's infrastructure, just like their cloud computing. They have cloud fulfillment.
Yeah, and you're right. And that's a kind of it's almost a special case of the affiliate or drop shipping model.
But I think it's earth-shattering and game-changing in a way that, we say that those kinds of things in an exaggerated way sometimes. Well, I don't, but
no,
right.
No, of course you don't.
I mean, it literally does change the game. That is, the structure of the game can be different. There are different options for scalable infrastructure where you don't need a drop shipper. You just put Amazon between you and the manufacturer, and Amazon holds your inventory for you.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that briefly. So it's almost a new affiliate model, right? In some respects, because your fulfillment costs in Amazon are going to be up 15%. Not surprising there. Now, if you go to a much tighter relationship, they're going to take more. They're not going to guarantee map pricing. There's just some things like that, and you can end up getting almost nothing, including not even a list of customers. And so that's not necessarily the best.
But if you've got enough volume, you can literally just use them as your warehouse and shipping center. That's
true.
Your inventory goes directly there, and directly to your customers, and all Amazon does is pack and ship.
Yes,
and, right. 10 years ago, a friend of mine almost lost their business because they got slapped by Google a couple months after they signed a lease on a new warehouse.
Bad day, yeah.
And,
yeah, the bad day.
Multiple containers on the water on the way, and though your main traffic channel is dried up.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like Amazon, for a variety of reasons, not just, it's their cloud computing and also their cloud fulfillment, if we call it that, have changed the way you could enter a new market. And that's the reason we've got, some of our friends, like Ezra, for example, teaching that model of getting into a business very easily by using Amazon fulfillment. And some of our private clients, got into their current business by Amazon fulfillment. But, in working with them, I realize, that the numbers are, and this is not in this presentation here, about when we talk about different channels, and that's one thing we should add to one of our future presentations, about how do you make the determinations about where you invest in different channels. And so a lot of folks who are in e-commerce are probably selling on their own website and Amazon and Etsy and eBay and all the others, right? And that's a very good thing to do, don't get me wrong. But how do you adjust what investments you make in those different channels, and how do you actually kind of compare apples to apples across those channels? Not really straightforward. We just recently we worked with and finally brought on board a prospect overseas about this, and that was a lot of the discussion is about, well, how much are we doing on the site versus any of the other channels, and what's the right investment paradigm? How do I decide how much I should push on these third-party channels versus how much I should push in terms of my own website? There's not a one-size-fits-all answer on that. That takes a little bit of analysis, which we did for this client. It took several weeks to really reach conclusions on that. But starting out, selling on Amazon, fantastic low-risk way of testing what's going to work and what's not going to work. We actually have one. I think we still have that client. We were working with for quite some time. Who didn't even have a website, was only selling through Amazon, and that's it can happen, it can work. I still characterize it as a short-term strategy. So one of those things you would do when you're starting out, and you want to move to having your own property as being in the majority of your sales at some point.
The thing is, if you're trying to build a brand and not right, it's a different story, right? If you're already, the manufacturer, or at least you're having someone produce and provide branded goods. If you're trying to build a brand, then Amazon is a channel that helps you build that brand.
Right.
Initially.
And it's a very important channel to be in very early on for that reason, if nothing else. But also, just the ability to drive volume can change the math on manufacturing and all that stuff quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, let's complete this, and I know we're bound to have some questions. So first of all, let me say that there's some special cases that we'll cover for another day, and I think we added one to the list, which was how do you deal with the mobile channel selling, right? Because a lot of the folks in e-commerce are doing and should be. By the way, everybody who's selling doing e-commerce on their own website should also be in those other channels. But so some of the things we didn't cover today is services, particularly marketing services. I know a lot of the folks that follow us are marketing consultants. Info marketing and software as a service and IP licensing, they're special because they have essentially zero variable cost. Now, you'd think that would solve all problems. It doesn't. There's a variety of reasons it doesn't. But I think that most of the people who are following us are not primarily in one of those last three bullets. I think there are a lot of people in the services bullets. Most of what I've said in this presentation is applicable to services. Just realize that the cost of delivering the service is your cost of goods sold, and so you got people who are writing and managing AdWords ads. That's cost of goods sold, right? And you want to be tracking those people differently than you're doing your accountant and your management team, right? But services, there's still some differences there as opposed to product sales, and this doesn't totally address that. But to end this, and we've already kind of alluded to a little bit, here's a plan to grow from nothing to selling, and I mean selling your business. So the first thing was affiliate marketing. I mean, it's a great idea, and it may actually be that you're talking about selling through Amazon. Find some underserved market for an existing product. So find something that's selling, and you say, you know what, this is a group of people who are not being appropriately served, and they're buying it, or they're not buying it and should buy it, but it's just that people aren't talking to them in the right way. Okay, and then optimize your message and marketing strategy. Even if you take a loss doing it, as long as you can afford the loss, and so that's why I use the word small, whatever small means to you, right? To Trump, it means something different than it does to me, damn it. And so phase 2 would be to move up to drop shipping. And this is where you optimize the financial model and grow your profitability. You figure out where you can get that stuff yourself using your now newfound messaging and understanding of the marketplace. So now you can definitely, if you cannot get to profitability with drop shipping, you got a problem, right? And then stash some cash. You want to be able to make the transition up to doing the next phase, which is either importing or manufacturing. The thing is, between phase 2 and phase 3, you're going to need a lot more financial resources. In drop shipping, yeah, they were on a credit check or whatever the hell, right? But you're not warehousing. You're not carrying inventory, and so it's not like you need to really have a bank line. When we're talking about running a manufacturing organization, you're not doing that without a bank line. Okay, it's just bear in mind. Just get ready for that. And so if your FICO is 400, you're gonna have to plan a little bit before you actually run a manufacturing company. At this point, you're optimizing your margins. You're focusing on the economies of scale, because the only way this works. I mean, if you're a manufacturing company, pretty much you have to do it by scale. That's the only reason to be a manufacturer. And of course, obviously, as you grow, all your ratios should be better. And then the fourth is exit. If you can build a so-called vertically integrated company, that is, say, in phase 1 you figured out the marketing. In phase 2, you tested some products. In phase 3, you built your own products. You are now at a place where you own top to bottom for the market. Okay, not all the way down to sand, just down to silicon. That's fine, but I'm saying that at this point, you are a complete organization that has really, really huge value. At this point, you are also probably in 8 figures, and that's where you should be planning to exit. Talked to a lot of people, just one of them this week, in fact, talking about, they were planning they were thinking about selling their $600,000 a year business. That's a dumbass idea, just flat out. Don't do that. You might as well just close it. you don't even get 1 times revenue. And so don't bother with that. We'll talk about exits in a few weeks. But the reality is you should plan on an exit, but you understand what that exit looks like. And if you're going to say, well, I'm going to build a lifestyle affiliate marketing business, there's never going to be an exit other than just stopping. A drop shipping business, yes, you could come up with an exit. It's not going to be a great valuation because you don't own enough of the value chain. The reality is, if you really want to have a significant exit, and by significant exit I mean a decamillionaire event, then you need to vertically integrate. So we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever. But when you do that, bear in mind that you will have some tax consequences that are so unique. So unique is a really silly term, but that are available to such a small number of people that you could fit all of those people into a reasonably sized hotel. So just bear in mind that if you really want to grow a big business as opposed to just run a really good job for yourself, there's a path to that. There's only really one path to that, and it involves it requires that you evolve your business model step by step. So with that, I'm done with the prepared presentation. Dan, open to comments and stuff, and I haven't actually obviously looked at comments in chat. So
we have a few questions out there.
Okay, good. Let me see here.
So Andy had a good question, which the answer is both, kind of. Where would you put the employees or labor? And that's going to be a little bit of variable and a little bit of fixed, most likely, at some scale.
Yes, and that's the thing. So it depends. I mean, what on your business model. And so if you're running a factory, okay, for example, all right, you can't really say, well, that Bob and Jill, had this percentage of their time devoted to any particular component. It doesn't work that way. And that's why I said, as soon as you start being in the manufacturer importer, you have a very complex measurement you have to do. Now, there's a process called activity-based cost accounting that, if you wanted to get really deep into it, but you would not do that until you were like a 9-figure business. Then yes, you would do that. Something like GM does or should have been doing this by now. It's ABC's been around for a long time. Then yeah, something like that, they could be doing that. But for a much smaller company, what you do is you do lumped accounting. And so what you say is like, here's my factory floor. There are 8 people. This is what they total. I'm going to spread it across all of my unit sales. And so I say, I sold 100 units and I spent, whatever, and so there's $2 per on each unit. And I just that's how I come up with my variable cost per unit. It's not accurate. And so when you're thinking about growing in your projections, you have to think about that. So service business like us, okay? One of the things I look at is, right, how much spare bandwidth do we have? And so what does that mean about when I say, so I project this is what we're going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 months out, what does that mean about our staff costs? Because I'm trying to look at how much spare bandwidth do I have, which means how many new heads do I have to add in order to be able to deliver that new business. Same kind of thing, right? No cost is either absolutely fixed or absolutely variable. It's just a model. It's a lie we tell ourselves in order to make the math palpable. It's, I guess, the question. So, yeah. Seems you were saying the consulting business sucks unless you can transform it into an information business. No, Terry, that's not true. The largest businesses in the world are service-based businesses. Period. I've said this over and over and over again. Everyone is like thrilled to absolute death about products businesses and software businesses, and it's absolute bullshit. The reality is that the largest businesses in the world are service-based businesses. Is a bank a product business? No. Is a bank a information business? No. It's a service business. What are the biggest businesses in the world, right? They're stockbrokers and banks. Okay, so no. I will say though, and I just think, wow, this is like going way back to one of Mike Koenig's launches about good consulting and bad consulting. Good consulting is the one guy doing it all himself. Good consulting is EDP. It's like consulting and businesses are great. I mean, it's the reason we are one. The reality is that services businesses are the best businesses ever, and we need to cover that why that's true. We need to cover later. Okay, products businesses, fantastic. Service business, fantastic. On balance, if I was to choose, which I did, Dan and I did that actually already. Sorry, Corey and Michelle, I didn't bring you into the discussion.
Brought in because of the discussion.
Yeah,
pretty much.
It's okay. We're just happy to be here, right, Corey?
He's just nodding and smiling. All right, good. So
these two people are the only reason this is ever going to be a real business, Leslie. So just be nice to them.
Fine enough. Fair enough. It's so.
What?
There are some differences in the way you sell products and services.
Yes.
And that's actually, when you get right down to it, that is the big difference. Is the way products and services are communicated to customers. But they're both really good businesses. Don't get me wrong. Marketing, consulting, marketing services business, Terry, it's actually the best business you could ever build. Emphasis, build.
Well, the thing is, you can walk into, as a consultant, if you're careful about choosing where you walk in the door, you can walk in and every time know that you have this huge ability to leverage a giant opportunity and turn it into a whole bunch of profit for somebody. And it's not that hard to get them to share that profit with you if you can do that. So if you don't suck at what you're consulting about, then I think consulting is a great business. And if you're not trying to consult about something that nobody ever makes money on.
Well, yeah, and the thing, sorry, I didn't mean to overtalk you. But the thing is, right, when you're a one-person shop, which a lot of our folks are, and a lot of people watching are, it feels very difficult because somehow we get ourselves caught up in trading time for dollars, and there's only so many dollars in a day, or so much, and so much time in a day, and I think that's probably where he's coming from, is that, and back when I first started consulting 20 years ago, I would spend all my time trying to find a customer, and then I would spend all my time helping that customer, and then when I was done, I wouldn't have a customer because they'd be helped, but I also wouldn't have a new customer, and so that's a business problem, not the problem of being a consultant. That's a how you do your job problem, I think.
Well, yeah, let's talk to all of the one-person shops out there that are, if you are the lever, you don't have as much leverage as you think. So get some help. Okay, sermon over.
Yes, yeah. There are several. Yeah, God. This really does need to be a presentation by itself about how to sell services versus products.
Yeah.
And so we'll get to that. As I said, there were some that those are special cases. Help us. Where's the buttons? There's Felix. Thanks, Terry. Don't swear at the buttons. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Terry and JP both had strong entries in the jokes contest. I guess, is it time to vote on the jokes contest yet?
I could go for it, Dan. You would be the master of the jokes.
All right. So that's Terry, and then JP. When you were talking about the paper clips, he says normally you bought pay per click.
Oh God!
So,
geez.
Okay, so I'm guessing you're voting for Terry, Michelle, Terry, or JP. Who's winning the jokes contest?
JP.
Yeah.
Corey's in for JP because it made Leslie facepalm.
I think I'm gonna have to go with the crowd on this one. Yeah.
I just thought it was punny.
It was punny.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
all right.
So Corey loses the internet for today and must turn over the keys to JP by noon.
Anyway, it's a passing fad. Let's say Terry actually brings up an interesting. It seems by observation that most small businesses need to be concerned with positive cash flow more than profits. Well, sort of. I mean, you have to be able to keep the doors open, right?
Kind of depends on how the business is being financed.
Well, exactly, and so
And there are a lot of businesses that you don't want to go into if that's the state that you're in. You're not going to be able to make a good run of it, because there are some businesses that require you to have some cash to buy your way in. You got to think about how big are the table stakes. If you're going to move up to the next level, how big are the table stakes to get there, and do I really want to put that there?
I mean, yes, that's absolutely true. In a perfect world, I mean, okay, that doesn't really exist. Semi-perfect world. What you want to do when you're testing a business, you want to build revenue at all costs, because what you're really trying to figure out if the market exists and you know how to message it. And so in stage 1, revenue should be your goal. In stage 2, profitability should be your goal, and that's because you need to make sure now there's a market. Okay, I can get revenue. The question is, can I actually perform at a and actually make money? Is it a real business? And then finally, there's about scaling, about growth, how to actually grow that once you've actually proved that. But it really is 2 phases. It was like once upon a time, my son wanted to to do something in the role-playing game market. Okay, it turns out there's just no money in it. Those people, like, they plagiarize shit and they just copy stuff, each other's books and whatever. And so there's a lot of interest, but there's not a lot of revenue available in that market, at least at the time we just studied it. And so we didn't even get past phase 1. Right? It wasn't a matter about whether or not you could find something where you could get a reasonable markup. You just couldn't get any revenue at all, even at a loss. And so, move on. Now, some things you'll find is that you could find that there's money there, but you can't figure out how to deliver what they want in such a way that you can actually make money doing it. Okay, that's a different problem. It's a sad thing to get to that stage, because it probably means that you blew some money doing it. But if you can get past that second stage, now you know the formula. And then it's just about how do you scale it? How do I, is it adding people? Is it adding machines? Is it reducing this particular, cost driver? Whatever it is. So just bear in mind those are kind of the natural phases. So, that would be great to continue with his services and other business types. Yeah, and Andy, I realized Dan and I historically attract a lot of the smaller marketing consultant types, and we understand that, and so yeah, we'll take that up. There's the basic math works the same. The trick is the numbers are all over the map, though. You can't really say that one slide I said is like normal healthy numbers. That doesn't really exist in the services business. What instead happens is that you're not selling against anyone. That's the thing. And so
you're selling money at a discount, and the negotiation is over how much of a discount, and the other key variable there is how much money can you produce. Because if you can't produce more than somebody else, then there is a conversation about competition. But you should be able to find opportunities where you can improve a result for someone, and if you focus on those right kind of opportunities where you can make the most difference, then you'll be able to make the most money in the long run. And that might mean saying no to stuff that you kind of want to do for cash flow right now, but that's not always the right decision. Sometimes it's better to eat ramen noodles and get to the right kind of business.
All true. That's the thing is there that's the long-term consequences for your business is that you actually are able to sell money at a discount for your clients, and that's certainly what you have to promise up front. The trick, though, is in order to get there, is that the reality is that you're just selling complete BS. That it's the people who succeeded initially, you know, in the services area are the ones who would BS the best, because you're only selling a claim. You know, it's when I sell you an iPad, you get the damn iPad. But when I sell you a marketing service, I'm just selling you a promise for something that you might, maybe, hopefully get in the future. And that's true of anyone who's selling a service. I mean, even if it's damn garbage collection. I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing ever, right? We actually have a problem with the people picking up our recycling. They pick up our garbage, but they don't pick up our recycling. And then we've called them like 4 frickin' times to like pick up our damn recycling. It's like you have to like manage your garbage collector. Weird. Okay, and so, but I mean, they're selling a service, and so we believe it's like, yes, we pick it up every Thursday. Awesome, we're signed up. But then they don't, right? So with services, you're selling this like promise of the future. You're selling this future event. With an iPad, it's not very far in the future. You know, like worst case scenario, like the very first one I got, it took 6 days from China. But the you know, mostly when you're selling a product, it's very short, right? I mean, the future, the payoff is really near. With services, typically not. And so the way you end up selling services is way more on intangibles than with physical products. And intangibles are not comparable one to another. I can go online and I can list where am I going to get my Glock magazines, this place or this place. Well, it turns out it's, you know, map pricing by Glock, and so there's no difference. Other things, that's not the case. And so I can go to this place or this place. It's like, oh, well, there's this, but it's not shipping included, and this one, but shipping is included, and, well, I like this one better than that one, and, all right, so there's some comparisons. When you try to compare services, you really can't do that. And so the way services are sold are characteristically different than the way products are sold, and that changes everything. All the numbers are basically out the window. That's what I got to say about that. So.
I think one of the things that I've noticed, and I actually had a conversation about this, and Leslie and you and I have talked about this, is especially when it comes to services, is that people, if you're helping a business, they don't necessarily know what's going on in their own business. And so you need to not only know your numbers, but you need to help them understand their numbers, because they don't know what a customer's worth. They don't know how long a customer should be around. If you bring in a customer that spends $100 one time and it costs $90 to get that person, they might think that was a loss. But if on average they keep somebody for 6 months, you know, then that was a $510 win in a way. And so, but a lot of business owners don't understand that, and one of the things that I've been saying is a lot of people kind of, in a way, get lucky. They put out a shingle and they're able to get lucky enough where they stay in business, and they don't understand the numbers like you just described. So I think it's important, I'm seeing it's important to be able to explain to people easily those concepts, especially with service.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's true. I mean, you know, we're mixing two things here. So I mean, most companies are doing product sales and e-commerce. You know, our larger portion of them are probably listening to this, you know, this webinar, are B2C. But when we start talking about services, we're mostly talking about B2B, at least in the people that we talk to, right? I mean, garbage collection is B2C, obviously. Well, B2B as well. But when we're talking about things like marketing services and advertising services, stuff like that, we're talking about B2B. And that's, you know, Corey, where you get to that point, which is, you know, very well taken, is that as the consultant service provider, not only do you need to understand your own numbers, but you have to understand how those relate to your customers' numbers. To know even what you could charge that would make sense long term for them, and to help them make the decision in numerical terms. So absolutely. Yeah, Terry points out that cash flow management, and that can work for you and against you, depending. And so one of the things, another one of the economies of scale was not considered here, and that's where we talked about earnings before tax, as opposed to EBITDA, which includes, depreciation, taxes, and allowances, and interest, right? So that's where you get in, where you get to be a large enough business, then some of those, the ITDA actually matters, where you are actually optimizing cash flow. And so where a CFO becomes a profit center, fundamentally. But we're talking about a significantly sized business here. There's not a $1 million or $2 million or even $3 million business, more like $8, $10, or $12 million business, where you could even consider that makes sense. So yes, cash flow management's important. Although I will say that in all businesses, all small businesses, cash flow management is very important. It's not down about the float and about product, product purchase and delivery, and that's the reason. One of the very first things you really ought to do, when you crest $1 million, is get a line of credit, even if it's a small one. You really ought to be doing that. But that's another story, different than what we had planned for today. So I think that's all our questions. Is that, or have I not seen some of them?
No, looks like everything.
Okay, good deal. So what else? What kibitzing from the rest of the trust here?
I think I'd love to hear you do, and I think folks would like to see this multiple model for another time. This how do you determine that? How do you determine how much you do on Etsy, how much you do on Amazon, how much you focus on your own site? Because we learned long ago that leveraging the power of these other properties is pretty big, right? But how do you make that your business and not screw that up? So,
actually, I just got the memo that the Solver add-on pack is available for Excel 2011 for Mac, and so I'm going to be rebuilding some old models, some what-if models in Excel now that I've got that. So maybe we'll be able to get a look in some of those in a week or two, because that's kind of it lets you figure out kind of how you balance different channels as a retailer and stuff like that. If I want to make sure that I sell this much of this vendor's product, because that gives me preferred discounts. There's lots of things like that that can come up in your business, and this can help you understand them. But if you can't see a relevant example, it'll look cryptic and strange if you haven't spent years dealing with it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, and we do have several clients, either service or private clients, that sell in multiple channels, and it's pardon me, it is it's complicated in some cases to figure out what you should do.
Like that's the clearly, yes, we know how to do it exactly, except it's complicated and it's different every time.
Well, actually, there's no way to do it exactly. That's the thing.
That was sarcasm. Sorry, I forgot my hashtag.
No, I didn't see the tag.
We got cameras, so we could probably just do the sarcasm sign like this.
Like, is that the sarcasm sign?
No, that's the faux hawk sign. That's next week.
Hashtag sign, with the hashtag sign over.
Okay, lost me there.
We're way
Okay.
over, Leslie. We got to wrap this so that all of us can go do things that we've already committed to doing.
And we've obviously degenerated into silliness. So, okay, so that last call. And so next week, I'm not sure exactly what we're doing next week. But,
Part two? Part two?
Let's see.
Well, if this was part 1 of 3, then there must be 2 more parts.
Well, yeah, I wasn't promising to do them all in a row, but I could do them all. Let's see. Wasn't it funnel? Sure, yes. No, that one I actually already have done. All right, so next week we'll do funnel math. Funnel math, not funnel cakes. That's different. Funnel math.
Although if you sell funnel cakes, you have funnel math that's about funnel cakes, and that's about as meta as dessert gets, really.
It might actually be more redundant than meta, but okay, sure. Okay, good. All right, so
that's ironic.
It's worth that. All right, so hashtag. And so, all right, so next week we'll be doing funnel math, part 2 of the whole math of business. And so we will see you here at the same bat time and bat channel here on the Braintrust. So thanks everybody for hanging in there, and we'll see you next week.